Over the course of several decades, Robert Redford never failed to enthrall audiences with his charisma, talent, and a life that appeared to be destined for the big screen. The deeply personal story of love and heartbreak that he kept hidden was, however, hidden behind the iconic roles and red carpet appearances that he brought to the public. From a whirlwind Hollywood romance to private moments that shaped his soul, Redford has remained tight-lipped about the one woman who gave him an indelible mark on his heart. He has not disclosed any information about her to this point. Finally, at the age of 88, the legendary actor has revealed the identity of the woman who has been the love of his life. Who exactly was she, and why did he keep this information a secret for such a long time? It is likely that you are aware of Robert Redford's status as one of the most accomplished actors in history, right? That guy with golden hair and a smile that lit up the screen in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, or the charming lead in The Way We Were with Barbra Streisand. Both of these actors were absolutely charming. Nevertheless, Robert was a typical child growing up in Santa Monica, California, in a family that belonged to the working class. This was a long time before Hollywood got its hands on him. His father worked as an accountant, and his mother had the responsibility of running the household. Together, they led a simple life in Van Nuys. The beginning of someone who would eventually be rubbing elbows with the most famous people in the world was not the kind of beginning that one would anticipate hearing about. Robert was a unique individual from a very young age. He treasured the outdoors, sports, and the arts more than he did schoolwork. He referred to himself as a poor student because he was unable to concentrate in the classroom. However, when he was on the tennis court or holding a paintbrush in his hand, he was able to concentrate. He even had the opportunity to warm up for the legendary tennis player Pancho Gonzalez at the Los Angeles Tennis Club. Can you even fathom that? However, school was not his thing, and he had a difficult time. After he arrived at the University of Colorado, things began to go in a negative direction. Because of his heavy drinking, he was unable to keep his scholarship, and he was eventually expelled from the school. It was possible that this was the conclusion of his story. However, for Robert, it was only the beginning of his journey. After that, he simply wandered around Europe, taking in the sights and sounds of life in countries such as France, Spain, and Italy. His life consisted of drawing, painting, and figuring out who he wanted to be. He lived a simple life. The idea of beginning a career in acting was conceived during this period of time. When he finally made it back to the United States, he was eager to experiment with something different. After relocating to New York, he attended Pratt Institute to work on his painting skills, and then he attended the American Academy of Dramatic Arts to try his hand at acting. He did not achieve success right away and did not receive any major breaks, but he persisted in his pursuit of acting by accepting small roles on stage and television. And now, allow me to tell you about the love story that had such a significant impact on Robert's life. At the end of the 1950s, he had the opportunity to meet Lola Van Wagenen. She was composed, having a firm grasp on reality, and deeply rooted in her Mormon faith, traits that Robert lacked. Unlike Robert, who was raised in California, she was from Provo, Utah, which is a completely different place. They were able to connect. Both he and she recognized something in each other. He saw something in her. Due to the fact that their connection was so strong, they decided to elope in 1958, despite the wishes of her parents. Give it some thought. There was a young couple who were barely older than their children who left to get married because they could not bear to be apart from one another. It's the kind of thing that romance novels are made of. However, they had a difficult time in the beginning of their lives. As an actor, Robert was still trying to make a name for himself, but money was always tight. Through whatever work he could find, they were able to make ends meet while living in cramped apartments. Tragic events then took place. As a result of sudden infant death syndrome, their first child, Scott, passed away. They were brought closer to one another in some ways, despite the fact that it was a devastating loss, the kind of loss that could break anyone. During that time, Lola's capacity for strength served as a rock for Robert. Over time, he expressed that she was the love of his life, and it is easy to understand why. Through the pain of heartbreak and the uncertainty of the future, she never stopped believing that he would prevail. Things became busier and more complicated as Robert's career reached new heights of success. It was in the 1963 Broadway production of Barefoot in the Park that he played a newlywed opposite Elizabeth Ashley. This was the role that brought him to the forefront of the acting world. As a result of the praise he received from audiences, Hollywood began to take notice. Before he was cast in his first major film roles, he quickly became a familiar face on television shows such as The Twilight Zone and Perry Mason. By the late 1960s, he had grown into a full-fledged movie star. If you've seen him in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, you've probably seen him in the film with Paul Newman, right? Despite the fact that the movie was a huge success, their chemistry was electric. Instantaneously, Robert was no longer merely an actor. But despite the fact that he was a household name and a heartthrob, fame does come with a price, doesn't it? Robert was constantly working, much of the time on location for several months at a time. While this was going on, Lola was doing her best to raise their 3 children, Shauna, David, and Amy, at home. It began to wear on their relationship as he struggled to maintain a healthy balance between his rapidly advancing career and his family life. Robert has acknowledged in his later years that he bemoans the fact that he did not prioritize his family more frequently. In addition to being ambitious and driven, he was perhaps a little too focused on establishing a name for himself. On the other hand, it was difficult to see things from a different perspective back then. Through the ups and downs of their marriage, they were able to share some truly beautiful moments. His wife, Lola, was more than that. Her role was that of a sounding board and confidant for him. She was a supporter of his decision to establish the Sundance Film Festival, which went on to become a significant stepping stone for independent filmmakers. Robert was working on a project that he was passionate about, something that reflected his belief in not being afraid to take risks and supporting new voices in the film industry. What are the chances that Sundance would have ever taken place if Lola hadn't been there to encourage them? By the middle of the 1980s, however, the breakups in their relationship had become too significant to ignore. After being married for 27 years, they made the decision to divorce in the year 1985. It was not a miserable breakup at all. They continued to be friends, and their children were raised jointly by both of them. Despite this, it was the conclusion of an era. The fact that Robert later referred to Lola as the love of his life is a sentiment that conveys a great deal of information about the strength of their connection. He was left with an indelible impression of her, despite the fact that they were unable to make their marriage work. The breakup of Robert and Lola brought about significant changes in his life, both in terms of his personal life and his professional life. The loss of the stable anchor that was his marriage was, without a doubt, a difficult experience. However, Robert did not allow the pain of his heart to deter him. Sônia Braga, a fiery Brazilian actress who is known for her daring roles and vibrant personality, was the person that Robert met in 1987, not long after he had left his previous relationship. It didn't take long for the two to become acquainted, and their romance was a riot. Not only was Sônia stunningly beautiful, it appeared as though she possessed a fervent energy that was comparable to Robert's own intensity. Even though they had been together for less than a year, the time that they spent together was anything but typical. In the course of this time period, Robert was actively engaged in the promotion of the Milagro Beanfield War, a film that he had directed and which examined the struggles of a small town in New Mexico against the greedy developers. Although it did not exactly do well at the box office, the film was filled with a lot of heart and purpose, which were two things that Robert placed a lot of importance on. Being with Sônia was like being in a whirlwind. It was full of exciting moments and passions that we both shared. Additionally, they were seen walking the red carpet together at the Cannes Film Festival, where they were a sight to behold. On the other hand, despite the fact that they were both very bright, their relationship burned out just as quickly. Through the year 1988, they had parted ways with one another. When Robert was working on the film Havana in 1990, his life took yet another unexpected turn. This occurred a couple of years later. Presenting herself is the stunning Swedish actress Lena Olin, who possesses piercing eyes and a magnetic charm. It was not just on screen that they had chemistry with one another. It made its way into the real world. When you watched their scenes together, you could easily sense the spark and the pull that existed between two individuals who were unable to ignore what was taking place. Additionally, if you were present at the premiere of the movie, you might have had the opportunity to observe that their kiss was not just for the cameras. Those were the real ones. Their relationship lasted for about a year, but it left an impression on both of them. The relationship between Lena and Robert was more than just a romantic one. They were able to share moments of vulnerability and creative expression. During this time period, Robert was continuing to take unorthodox approaches to his professional situation. The film Havana, which was set against the backdrop of Cuba during the revolution, had a feeling of being deeply political and having a lot of layers. The same level of intensity that Robert poured into his relationship with Lena was the same level of depth that he thrived in when he was reading stories. As is the case with many Hollywood romances, however, it was not intended to last. By the year 1991, they had parted ways, but the time that they spent together added another chapter to the ongoing story of love and life that Robert was telling. Moving forward in time to the middle of the 1990s, Robert was once again demonstrating to the world that getting older did not mean you had to slow down. His performance in the romantic drama Up Close and Personal, in which he co-starred with Michelle Pfeiffer, left viewers head over heels in love. An experienced journalist falls in love with a rising TV anchor, and the movie tells the story of their relationship. It is a story about love, mentorship, and ambition. At the age of 58, it should come as no surprise that Robert was still playing romantic leads. His signature charisma and rugged good looks made it appear as though he was doing it without any effort. Away from the camera, however, his romantic life continued to develop. A costume designer named Kathy O'Rear, who was nearly 20 years younger than Robert, was rumored to be involved with him around this time. It is possible that the fact that Kathy was not a part of the Hollywood spotlight was what Robert found so appealing about her. In the midst of the chaos that was his career, she provided a sense of stability, was creative, and stood on a firm foundation. Their romantic partnership was not widely publicized in the media or featured prominently on the covers of magazines. It was peaceful, private, and exactly what Robert required for a temporary period of time. Robert was engaged in more than just acting during these years. In addition to directing and producing, he was in the process of continuing to mold the film industry. Following the release of Up Close and Personal, he released The Horse Whisperer in 1998, which was a profoundly emotional film. Not only did he direct the film, but he also starred in it. He played the role of a man who heals broken horses and, in the process, assists a family in healing its own wounds. It was once again demonstrated that Robert was capable of captivating audiences, regardless of whether he was in front of or behind the camera, as the film was a commercial success. By this point, Robert had already established himself as a figure that was more than just a Hollywood star. When it came to telling stories, he was a cultural icon who was not afraid to take risks or dive into projects that had significant meaning. His unwavering commitment to independent filmmaking, as demonstrated by his participation in the Sundance Film Festival, was revolutionizing the industry by providing a stage for filmmakers whose stories might not have been told otherwise. Considering that he was admired not only for his talent, but also for his vision, it is not surprising. However, if there is one thing that Robert's life demonstrates, it is that it is not always simple to strike a balance between love and work. Different stages of his journey were reflected in his relationships, whether they were with Sonia, Lena, or Kathy. In the same way that his films brought different aspects of himself to the screen, each woman brought something distinctive to his overall life experience. Even Jane Fonda, who had been his longtime co-star and friend, couldn't help but think about how their relationship had developed over the years. Over the course of their time working together on films such as Barefoot in the Park and The Electric Horseman, Jane admitted at one point that she had fallen in love with Robert. She stated that he was not the easiest person to work with, as he frequently arrived late or in a bad mood. However, there was something about him that kept her drawn to him. An additional layer of complexity was added to Robert's story by the fact that their professional partnership lasted for decades and never developed into a romantic relationship. During the decade of the 2000s, Robert continued to broaden the scope of his career in ways that extended beyond the realm of the silver screen. He was responsible for directing The Legend of Bagger Vance. He worked on projects related to the environment, and he even produced films that were socially conscious, such as The Motorcycle Diaries. His life was filled with a multitude of passions, and he was constantly moving forward and developing. In retrospect, you begin to recognize a pattern in the relationships and moments that you have experienced. Whether it was in love or in his professional life, Robert was not afraid to take chances. He lived his life to the fullest. Whether it was by pursuing a romantic relationship with Sonia, attempting to form a connection with Lena, or discovering solace in the company of Kathy, in the same way that each film added a new dimension to his legacy, each woman became a part of our collective narrative. When Robert Redford met Sybil Sagars, a gifted artist and environmental activist, his life took yet another wonderful turn. Sybil Sagars was very influential in the world. The meeting between them was not a Hollywood story, rather it was uncomplicated, genuine, and took place against the backdrop of the natural beauty of his resort in Sundance Mountain. By the time Sybil arrived there in the late 1990s, she had little to no prior knowledge of Robert's fame. To put that into perspective, imagine someone meeting him without first recognizing him as a famous actor. Given that Robert had spent a significant portion of his life in the public eye, that must have been a welcome change of pace for him. After some time had passed, she even admitted that she had rented a number of his films in order to catch up with him before their first dinner together, but he did not mention them at any point. It wasn't about fame or movies when they first met. Rather, it was about two people connecting with one another. According to Robert, the fact that she did not know him as an actor contributed to the feeling that the relationship was more human and more genuine. The two of them eventually tied the knot in a private ceremony in Hamburg, Germany, which is her hometown. This connection grew stronger over the course of time. Sybil is an artist, and her work reflects both her love for the natural world and her dedication to problems pertaining to the environment. She creates works of art in the form of paintings, sketches, and even performance art that honor the earth while simultaneously bringing attention to the importance of preserving it. Together, Robert and Sybil developed into a formidable team during their time spent working as activists side by side. The Way of the Rain is a non-profit organization that was co-founded by Sybil and Robert. Its mission is to promote environmental protection through the combination of Sybil's artistic expression and Robert's storytelling. It was once said by Robert that Sybil gave him a whole new life, and it is clear that the two of them became even closer to one another as a result of their mutual love for the environment. Robert's love for his children and grandchildren remained unwavering throughout his life, despite the fact that Sybil became an important part of his later years. He had 4 children with his first wife, Lola Van Wagenen: Scott, Shauna, James, and Amy. This was his first marriage. Robert's life was irrevocably altered by the tragic loss of his son Scott, who passed away from sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, when he was only 2 months old. It has been mentioned in interviews that the pain that he experienced from Scott never really went away. It had an impact on him, and it may have caused him to develop a more profound perspective on life and family. James Redford, his second son, followed in his father's footsteps in a very careful and meticulous manner. James was a remarkable filmmaker and environmental activist who often used the art of storytelling to bring attention to issues that were of critical importance. Following his own experience with 2 liver transplants, he directed documentaries and worked on projects that brought attention to the critical need for organ and tissue donation. James and Robert are the co-founders of the Redford Center, which is a non-profit organization that focuses on producing films that inspire people to make changes in the environment. An additional heartbreaking moment for Robert was when James passed away in the year 2020 due to liver cancer. James was someone who was always focused on making the world a better place, and he was someone who was full of hope, according to his description. The legacy that James left behind was not only that of a filmmaker, but also that of a father and a source of motivation for those who were fortunate enough to know him. Robert felt a profound sense of loss for James, but he also felt a sense of pride in the things that his son had accomplished throughout his life. Shauna and Amy, Robert's 2 daughters, also carried on his creative spirit in their own separate ways. The year 1960 marked the beginning of Shauna's career as an artist. In spite of the fact that she maintains a low profile, her professional and family life exhibit the same quiet strength that her father has always admired. They raised 2 children, Micah and Connor, who are now forging their own paths in life. She married author Eric Schlosser, and the 2 of them raised their children together. Another creative, forceful member of the Redford family is Amy, the youngest of the Redford children. As a filmmaker, director, and producer, she draws inspiration from her father's storytelling instincts while also incorporating her own vision into her work. While simultaneously raising 3 daughters, Amy has directed a variety of films, including feature films, music videos, and even short films. The work that she creates reflects her conviction that women's voices should be amplified and that the challenges of motherhood should be embraced with creativity and determination. Her ability to navigate both her family and her career with passion is a clear indication of Robert's influence. Furthermore, there are the grandchildren to consider. Robert, who has 7 children in total, has discovered that he takes pleasure in observing the development of the next generation. His grandson Dylan, for example, has taken up the traditions of filmmaking that have been passed down through the family. Dylan even managed to persuade Robert to lend his voice to a movie that is called Omniboat, a fast boat fantasia. Are you able to fathom Robert Redford providing the voice of a dolphin? This demonstrates that he has not lost his sense of humor or his willingness to support the creative endeavors of his family when they are involved. Despite the fact that his family expanded and changed over time, Robert never stopped working. The 2010s were the decade in which he played some of the most intriguing roles of his entire career. A man who was stranded at sea was the character he played in the movie All Is Lost, which had almost no dialogue at all. The only thing thing that mattered was him, the ocean, and the tale of survival. It was regarded as one of the most impressive performances of his later career by the critics. Immediately after that, he made a surprising appearance in Marvel's Captain America, the Winter Soldier, playing the role of Alexander Pierce, the antagonist. Fans were thrilled to see him in the role of the mastermind behind Hydra, which was a major departure from the roles of the good guy he had played earlier in his career. After starring in The Old Man and the Gun in 2018, Robert made the announcement that he would be retiring from acting. In the film, he played a charming bank robber, which felt like a nod to his early roles in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It was the ideal way to bring his legendary acting career to a satisfactory conclusion, as it was packed with wit, adventure, and a feeling of nostalgia. Later on, however, Robert admitted that he had reservations about announcing his retirement, stating that, "You never know." And sure enough, he made a brief return in the role of Alexander Pierce in Avengers Endgame, demonstrating that he still had a little bit more to give. The love that Robert has always had for telling stories, whether through acting, directing, or producing, has remained the same throughout everything that has happened. Millions of people have been entertained, inspired, and challenged by the roles that he has played throughout his career. And even in his private life, he has never stopped telling stories. Even in his personal life, the story of a man who has lived his life to the fullest and with a lot of passion is told through his partnerships, his work with his children, and his contributions to activism. Robert continues to concentrate on the things that are most important to him, including his family, his art, and the environment. Even though Sabeel is by his side today, in the past, he expressed the belief that life is about learning and growing regardless of one's age. When you consider everything he has accomplished and the number of people whose lives he has changed, it is impossible not to feel motivated. Robert Redford is more than just a legendary figure in Hollywood. Throughout his life, he has been a father, a grandfather, an artist, and someone who has never stopped believing in the ability of stories to bring about change in the world. Robert Redford's life was filled with love, loss, and an unyielding determination to make a difference in the world. This is the story of his life. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and enable notifications if you found this journey through his incredible life to be enjoyable. Don't forget to leave a comment down below. Which of Robert Redford's roles or memories is your favorite, and why? It would be wonderful if you could get in touch with us. Your presence is greatly appreciated, and we hope to see you in the next one.
In Sheldon's life, he and Shannon regularly attend church and integrate their beliefs into daily decisions. This spiritual foundation helped them navigate difficult times. Through his work, Sheldon connects influential voices with audiences nationwide. He understands the power of effective communication and storytelling. His expertise helps speakers maximize their impact. This may sound unusual, but Sheldon does not have any children despite being married for decades. Moreover, the couple has also not talked about not having any kids so far. Nevertheless, they seem pretty content and happy with their life. The Bream couple are rather parents to a couple of dogs. Previously, they had a dog named Miss Mocha, after which they adopted Jasper. In 2022, they also have another dog who they have named Biscuit Bream. The couple's journey from college sweethearts to partners took a tragic turn when in 2013 Sheldon Bream faced a life-altering diagnosis that shook the couple's world. Fox News anchor Shannon Bream opened up about a difficult time in her and her husband's lives together, after doctors discovered that he had a brain tumor. "It was a complete shocker," Shannon said on Fox Nation's Ride to Work. The tumor's location made the procedure particularly challenging and risky. The medical team identified the mass as a